Okay, I'll take it, even though it's a little expensive. But it hasn't done it since. All right, so you give me the calls. So tkiya, give me that. Shvarim. Tura. Tkiya gdol. Nice. All right. That was pretty good. Too short. Well, I didn't want to show off. Yeah. All right. So the question is, right, that's the keva and kavanah. We all know that concept, right? Keva is the structure or the system, and then kavanah is what fills it. So today we're going to talk about what are the different ways that our rabbis imagine that we can think about and pray about while the shofar is blowing. And so the first part of this is called the cry. And if you can flip ahead. We got different sections, the charge, right? And so we're going to go through this pretty quickly. And we'll start with the cry, right? And so here's a story. And the question is, what does the story mean? You ready? A king had an only son, the apple of his eye. The king wanted his son to master different fields of knowledge and to experience various cultures. So he sent him to a faraway land supplied with a generous quantity of silver and gold. Far away from home, the son squandered all the money until he left completely destitute. He was left. In his distress, he resolved to return back to his father's house. After much difficulty, he managed to arrive at the gate of the courtyard to his father's palace. So far, so good. In the passage of time, try to think about the metaphor, of course. Right? In the passage of time, he had forgotten the language of his native country, and he was unable to identify himself to the guards. In utter despair, he began to cry out in a loud voice, and the king, who recognized the voice of his son, went out to him and brought him into the house, kissing him and hugging him. All right? And so what's the parable? What does the story mean? And I'll repeat it for the people on YouTube. Yeah. What does the story mean? What does it tell us about the technology of the shofar, of how the shofar works for the high holidays?
Helps us return home.
Good. And so we've wandered away from home throughout the year, and on the high holidays, we've returned back home. Good. And then how do you get recognized once you're at the gates? Not all the way home, you're at the gates of the palace. And then what happens in the story? Father hears him what? Crying. Okay, good. So the father hears the son crying, and that's when the gates open and the father and son are reunited, and a hug and a kiss ensues. So that's part of the way that the shofar works. Right? Yes, did you want to? Yeah.
Kind of the parable is if you forget all other ways of communicating with
Yeah.
God, this remains to you.
Right. So we forget, right? We forget to cry, right? So sometimes we daven and we get through it and it's nice and we socialize and all that's awesome. But what's missing sometimes that we find on the high holidays is the cry or the tears. And that's what God recognizes. That's what God hears. Rahmana liba ba'e. Right? So Rahmana is harachaman, which means the compassionate one, God. Liba comes from lev, heart. This is Aramaic. Right? Lev ba'e, wants, desires. Right? That's what the language of God is. That's the spiritual technology of the shofar. And so when the shofar is blowing, that's one of the ways that we can use the shofar to approach God, is we can imagine that it's crying. Here we go. What is the meaning of the trua sound? It may be the wail that we wail while crying. It may be the sigh that one does one after the other. It's a sigh and a cry, right? And right? It's the sigh and the cry. We're worried about great stress. It may also be both together, the sigh and the cry, which usually comes afterwards. This may be the trua, as this is the way of the warrior, to first sigh and then cry. Who wants to do that? David, you ready? You want to do a sigh and a cry? You're able to inhabit different, voices. Yeah, you're a trua. The sobbing, yeah. Breathless sobbing. Yeah. That was it? Oh, okay. Good. So what's happening here, right? There are a lot of choices about sighing and crying, right? So that's the trua. And the shvarim also, oh, right? So what question is the Rambam trying to answer, right? So we have to, right, what are we supposed to be thinking about? What do the sounds represent? And one of the things that we see here is that it represents a crying. And the crying is what it means to get close to God. All right, so next, Rabbi Menachem Mendel of Kutz, the Kusker Rebbe, born to a non-Hasidic family, but then became a Hasid. And then the next one is Rabbi Isaiah Horowitz, not a Hasid, right? And so we're going to have a choice here. You can either go with the Hasidic piece of Torah or the non-Hasidic piece of Torah, right? The Litvish. Litvish is opposite of Hasid. Yeah, okay. Litvish means, right, straight and to the point. So here we go. Here's the Hasidic one. Bend, dare to bend. The curvature of the shofar is kafuf, which is bent. It teaches us to bend our stubbornness and our pride. The sound of the shofar includes shvarim, sobbing, staccato of broken notes. Remember that teshuvah, repentance, the road to reconciliation, is a process of steps and of crying. The sound of shofar is broken, for in God's eyes there is nothing more whole than a broken heart. There's nothing more whole than a broken heart. And that's how we should be approaching the High Holy Days, right? With a broken heart, knowing all the things that we did wrong this year, knowing how we fell short this year, and cry. Rabbi Isaiah Horowitz, a little bit different. Each group begins with the tekiah, followed by a shvarim, the trua, fragmented sound. Each broken note is left in brokenness, followed by the tekiah. Rabbi Horowitz taught that when we hear the shofar, we hear this message: I started off whole, I became broken, splintered into fragments, but I shall become whole again. I shall become whole again. Right? And so, on one hand, we have Rabbi Nachal, the Kutzker Rebbe, who says it represents brokenness and we stay in the brokenness. And Rabbi Isaiah Horowitz says, no, we start whole and then we get broken and then we're whole again. Tia Gadola is the whole. And so, by show of hands, who prefers the wholeness on the high holidays and who prefers the brokenness on the high holidays? All in favor of brokenness. That's the spirit of the holidays. Okay, and then who's in favor of we become whole on the high holidays? There you go. We have 1 vote in the back, 2 votes in the 3 votes. Okay, good. You want to explain why? Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. This is both. All right. Wholeness. That's what we're after on the high holy days. Tell them, say something about that.
You want to come out of the high holy days really feeling like you've had teshuvah and you're ready to start a new year whole.
New Year whole. Beautiful. Yeah.
I think you have to look at one's brokenness to heal and become whole. And I think most of the year people don't want to go there and look at the brokenness.
Mm-hmm.
Holidays gives us the hours and hours and hours to sit with ourselves and go muck around in brokenness, and then we can heal.
And then we can heal. All right. So you be broken and then healing and whole. Yeah.
You're talking.
We're all talking. Yeah. Go ahead. Yes, Wendy.
My thought is that the sound is piercing.
Mm-hmm.
The sound is piercing me so that I can feel and begin to feel through the Rosh Hashanah leading up to Yom Kippur,
Mm-hmm.
just kind of pierce me to get me
Right.
ready to
Right. And I guess that's brokenness is the piercing.
that brokenness and heal.
Yeah. Well.
Almost like a tool to prod you.
Right. Oh, good. Like a needle.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's try the cry, right? So that's one kavanah. Here we go. Yeah, cry. Oh, yeah, that's true. Yeah, it's too beautiful. You're right, it's the shofar. Yeah, so maybe, it needs a little more kvetch. All right, so the revelation. So here's kavanah number 2. Vayhi bayom hashlishi b'yot boker. On the third day, as morning dawned, there was thunder and lightning and dense cloud upon the mountain. So what are we talking about? Where are we here in time? Sinai, right? And a very loud blast of the horn. And all the people were in the camp trembled, right? The kol shofar chazak me'od. So we were blowing, someone blowing shofar, or was it a noise from God? Yeah, God. I think that's God's shofar. Yeah. Loud, loud, and lightning and thunder. Moses led the people out of the camp and toward God, and they took their places at the foot of the mountain. It was all in smoke. God had come down upon it with fire, and the smoke rose like the smoke of a kiln. He kol shofar, and the blare of the horn grew louder and louder. As Moses spoke, God answered him in thunder. Right? So imagine if we were in grade school or religious school, I'd have you draw a picture, right, of what it sounded like and what it looked like. But in your mind's eye, see if you can paint a picture for yourself about this. So what's happening? The thunder is blasting, the shofar is blasting, the smoke is rising. This is like what's it like? Help me out. Like a hurricane cloud, right? Dark, right? Smoky. Storm moving in, right? And it just lands right on Mount Sinai, but it's loud, right? The shofar is sounding. When the shofar sounds 100 times, Rabbi Alan Liu, it blows open the gates of heaven. And the shofar sounds 100 times, and that's what it did here. It blew open the gates of heaven. And when the shofar sounds 100 times at the end, we hear the voice of heaven. We experience revelation, right? So the first kavanah was a cry, right? This is number 2. Right, and we're starting from scratch. So what does the shofar represent? It represents the moment of Sinai, the giving of the Torah, that moment, the most intimate moment that we had with God. Right, that's what the shofar represents. And that's the kavanah behind the shofar. The revelation at Mount Sinai. Oh, good. When the Torah gets revealed to, and God reveals God's self. Right, and Ma'amad Har Sinai, standing at Sinai when the Torah is given, Matan Zman Matan Toratenu, the time that our Torah was given. Right, that moment. Right, we stood at Sinai, and wind was blowing, and the shofar was sounding, and the smoke was rising, and it's tornado, hurricane, like the whole thing. There was no wind. The wind wasn't whipping, I guess, but probably. The ground was shaking with thunder.
The people had to know this was something really major.
Yeah.
It's not like they're just going up, that Moses just going up.
Right.
All of these things that they may have otherwise been unfamiliar with, and it's all happening at one time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Smoke, shaking.
A volcano.
Everything happening, so that gets your attention.
Right, absolutely. That gets your attention. There's a midrash that says that our souls left our body. It was such a frightening and spiritual moment. Our souls left our bodies as if we didn't have a soul in our body. And then they came back as soon as God said, Anochi Adonai Elohecha, I am the Lord your God. Our souls snapped back into our body. And so this was an earth-shattering, literally, experience. So here we go. A king was once here, so telling a story. And the question is, what does this story mean? Right, so get ready, okay? A king was once traveling in the forest, lost his way, until he met a man who recognized that he was the king and escorted his master out of the forest and back to his palace. The king later rewarded him with many presents and elevated him to a powerful minister's post. So far, so good? The king was traveling in the forest, lost his way, and then a man came and saved him, and the king rewarded him with presents and elevated him to the powerful minister's post. After a while, however, the man committed an act which was considered rebellious against the king, and he was sentenced to death. But before he was taken out to be executed, the king granted him one last request. The man said, "I request to wear the clothes I wore when I escorted His Majesty when he was lost in the forest, and that His Majesty should also wear the clothes he wore then." Right? Just get dressed in the garb that you were wearing at the time that he saved the king. The king complied, and when they were both dressed in the garments they wore at the time of the meeting, he said, "By your life you have saved yourself," and called off the execution. Right? So all he did was ask that we put on the same clothes, and then he was saved. So that's a little bit strange, right? So what does the story mean? What's that? Meaning to wear different clothes.
Well, no, the whole thing about what's a storm. A storm is disrupting. You might be going along your way,
Yeah.
lost or not.
Oh, I see, yeah.
And the storm comes in. Having done this personally as an 8 or 9-year-old in San Houston State Park years ago, or whatever it was called then, let me just say that it was not comforting to hear a storm.
Right. Right.
And feel rain.
Yeah. Good. Thank you. Yeah.
On this particular one, it was just a subtle reminder, oh, I saved you, now it's time for you to save me.
Very good. Yeah. So that's what the story means on the surface, right? Put on the same clothes, and the king was reminded of that moment when the minister saved his life, right, and granted him a pardon. Pardoned him. Good. So what's the metaphor for high holidays? We, right, what do? We go back to what we were doing at Har Sinai, right, during time of revelation. We put on those same clothes, and in this case, I guess it's my interpretation, we put on the same clothes that we experienced at revelation, right, and we remind God that we are God's partner, that God chose us, that we are the ones that have a special relationship with God. Everybody has their own special relationship, but ours was here at Sinai, right, and getting the 10 Commandments. And so we put on that same garb. We put on the same clothes we were wearing at the moment of Har Sinai, right? And that was the call of the shofar. It's just a little reminder that, look, you saved us, we saved you. It was a mutual revelation, and we put on that same clothes. And so it's a reminder of revelation, or a reminder of Har Sinai. Okay, that's number 2. Number 3, the charge. Right, so you can imagine, like in the old days, when the king was coronated. Maybe they still do this somewhere. Yeah, I guess maybe in England. Anybody? Where did they do that? Anyone? Yeah.
You see that in the British, in the courts of London, whenever you see the people holding up the horns.
Yeah, it still happens. Right, yeah.
They do the fox hunt, too.
That's right. The fox hunt. Yeah, so it was actually used, like the shofar was used a lot, right? And so what it means is, let's go. Time to go, right? On your mark, get set, go. That's what the shofar means. And also the coronation of the king. Here comes the king. The Lord said to Moses, have 2 silver trumpets made and make the hammer, right? And so you had these silver trumpets. When they're blown in long blasts, the whole community shall assemble before you at the entrance. When you hear these long blasts, that means you go, you move to the entrance of this tent of the meeting. And if only one is blown, so there's all you can read it on your own. But the point is, right, when we hear these blasts, there are different blasts that we hear, some long blasts, some short blasts, and what it means is it's time to move. So the east part of the encampment goes to the right. So it means get up and go. And verse 10, on your joyous occasions, your fixed festivals and new moon days, sound the trumpets over your burnt offerings. So it also accompanied the sacrificial system. We had the Levitical choir, and we had shofarot, right? Hallelujah, 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 big tiltzalei shema, tiltzalei shema. Yeah, I'm missing it. I missed it. Hallelujah. Thank you. Take a shofar, hallelujah, right? Nevel v'chinor. So we had nevel and chinor. We had the guitars going, and we had the shofar going. The trumpets were making their noises. And they shall remind you before God, and I am the Lord your God. Right? And so in this model, right, it's a charge. It means get up and go. And so the Rambam again has it here, wake up, sleepers, from your sleep. Right? We're like hanging around, doing our own thing. And when we hear the shofar, it's time to get up. It's time to go. On your mark, get set, go. The slumbers, arise from your slumber. Search your ways and return in Shuvah. And remember your Creator. Those who forget the truth amidst the futility of the moment and are infatuated all these years with vanity and nothingness that will not help and will not save. Examine your souls. Get up. Do it. Wake up. Enlighten. Improve your ways and your motivations. Let each of you abandon your wicked ways and your thoughts that are no good. Right? And so the first one was a cry. So maybe I'll blast a little bit less whole. Right? So this is the cry. That was a cry, yeah. All right, and the second one was, first one was a cry. Second one? The cry, not yet? Revelation, right. Okay, so the revelation. So this is Har Sinai. We're standing at Sinai, and the winds are whipping, and the smoke is rising. Right, so that's the Har Sinai. That's the moment of revelation. And then finally we have the coronation. It sounded similar, but the difference is the kavanah, right? So the first one is the cry. The second one is the, help me, revelation. And the third one is the coronation. All right, the physics. Yes. Right, so different blasts were specific to different people. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, the east campment moves this way and the way, right? And if the north. Let's read it. Good. Let's start with. Okay, verse 5. But when you, maybe verse 4, and if only one is blown, the chieftains, the head of Israel's contingents, shall assemble before you. So it's verse 3. Let's do it. When both are blown in long blasts, the whole community shall assemble before you at the entrance of the tent of meeting. So the two long blasts are for everybody to go to the entrance of the tent of meeting. Everybody come together. Ali, Ali, all come free. Anybody? Yeah, from your childhood. Anybody have that one? You missed that one, Marvin? Ali, Ali, I'll come free. Yeah, all right. That's what the two long blasts mean. And if only one is blown, the chieftains, heads of Israel's contingents, shall assemble before you. If two are blown, then it's the whole community. If only one is blown, then the chieftains. But when you sound short blasts, the divisions encamped on the east shall move forward. When you sound short blasts a second time, those encamped on the south shall move forward. The short blast shall be blown for setting them in motion. right? And so there's all different blasts for different kinds of people. Did you have a drosh on that? No, he's pointing it out. All right, good. Okay, good. The physics. So what does it mean for the mitzvah of, this mean for the mitzvah of hearing the shofar? Right, so there are all kinds of different blasts that we have and all kinds of different associations with that blast that we can have in mind when we're blowing. Okay, we start with the Rambam again. The Rambam apparently was really into the shofar. If he added a minimal amount of material to the shofar, just a little bit, if you added something, whether of its type, right? So if you add on a little bit of the ram's horn, or whether not of its type, it is disqualified. Any little change in the shofar means that it's no good anymore. Why? I don't have a great answer. It's not natural. It has to be natural. It's not pure, right? It has to be pure and natural. If he plated it with gold inside, what do you think happens? Disqualified. Or on the place that he puts his mouth, if he plates it on the inside or on the place that he puts his mouth, like a mouthpiece, disqualified. Right? It's treif. If he plated it on the outside, if the sound was changed from how it had been, it's disqualified. But if it did not, then it's fit. Right? So that's one exception. Plating it on the outside. Why is that an exception? I don't know. Maybe it's beautifies it, but doesn't change the sound at all. Keeps it pure and natural. If one placed a shofar into a shofar, I have no idea what that means. Right, good. It would be a little bit chaotic, I guess. If he heard the sound of the inner one, he fulfilled his obligation. So it's okay, as long as you're just hearing the pure and natural one. But if you heard the sound of the outer one, he did not fulfill it. Right? So we're going to ask the question of why is this so detailed? If he widened the narrow and narrowed its wide end, it is disqualified. You're not allowed to narrow it. Either end, the end of the shofar or the blowing part of the shofar, it is disqualified. So what's his message? What's the point here? Right? He's going through a lot of different scenarios. I think the one that we started with is still applicable. That has to be natural and pure, and that's an important part of the shofar. Why would that be an important part of the shofar? Why do we need it natural, and why do we need it pure? Again, I don't have a great answer. Right.
You don't bring any of the flaws in who you are that you display to people on a regular basis. It's you, your realness.
Yeah, your realness, your genuine self. Yeah, natural and pure, your natural self. Right, and the shofar represents, in that case, us. Right, we're connected to the shofar, and it's just as the shofar has to be genuine and real, so too do we have to be genuine and real. It can't put on any facade. It can't have any decoration on it. It has to be real and pure and genuine. So that's nice. Yeah. So when you hear the shofar blast, that's one of the kavanot that we can have. Right? So let's go through it. The first one was a cry the shofar. The second one was the Rebbe. Thank you. The second one was the revelation. Swirling in this storm of revelation. And I had that experience once. I was in Tzfat, and in the morning, it was like dawn. And during Slichot, right, all the month of Elul, you do the Slichot. And there are many shofarot. They blew a bunch of them at the same time. And so right during, like, Adonai, the 13 attributes of God, Adonai, El Rachum Chanun, everyone's blowing shofar and everyone's screaming, and it was beautiful. Beautiful, and it reminded me of that moment of revelation. Right? The third one is a coronation, and here we are, genuine and real and naked at our core, right, is part of what it means to be present, fully present at high holidays while we're hearing the shofar blast. Genuine and real. Good. Mishnah Torah, shofar, sukkah, and lulav. If its sound was low or high or rough, it is fit, for all sounds are fit with the shofar. Right? It doesn't matter what it sounds like. This one has a nice mellow tone, but there are some with a high-pitched tone. There are some with a low-pitched tone. Doesn't matter, right? What matters is that it's real and genuine. Shulchan Aruch. Normally, we do not allow the use of a stolen object to fulfill a mitzvah, which makes sense, right? If it's a stolen object, it's tainted. Lulav, I think that's a big question, if you're allowed to use a stolen lulav. Some say yes, some say no, but mostly no. But we do not allow the use of a stolen object to fulfill a mitzvah. Nevertheless, if you steal a shofar and you hear that sound, it's obviously not the best sound that you can hear on the shofar, because no one wants to hear the sound of a Rosh Hashanah from a stolen shofar. But if that's the sound I hear, I still fulfill my obligation. Right? So if you're, so the question is why? Why is it okay to hear the sound of a stolen shofar? Yeah. Good. You can't steal a sound. What? Good. Lishmoa kol shofar. When we make the bracha, we say Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitsham tzimtzmanu lishmoa kol shofar. To hear the sound of the shofar. The source of the shofar matters less than the sound of the shofar. And our tradition is you can't steal a sound. Right? So one of the interesting issues, if you're walking on Shabbat, like if you're walking by a concert, like we just moved next to Evelyn's Park, and Betsy's is there. And so on Friday night, do you ever know Betsy's? It's a cute little place right in Evelyn's Park. They have live music on Friday nights. And so it's not really Shabbosdik to walk by and listen and stop, but it's a sound, right? You can't do anything about a sound that's coming into your ears. Same is true here. It's not about the source of the sound. It's about hearing the sound itself. If I'm walking by a person's yard or a person's home, and a person is practicing the shofar on Rosh Hashanah, and I hear 100 blasts from his practicing, I do not fulfill my obligation. Interesting. So a stolen shofar, sure, it's not the best, but you fulfilled your obligation. If you're hearing the sound of somebody practicing their shofar on Rosh Hashanah and listening clearly, you have not fulfilled your obligation. Yeah. That's true. I don't know why they're not blowing in synagogue. He's practicing in the afternoon or something.
What if the listener does not know that it's practice?
I think they're good. Very good. It's another question.
The intention is not.
Good. Okay.
The person blowing the shofar doesn't have the intention as practicing.
Right. And what about the stolen shofar? Yeah, but he still has intention. It's just a stolen shofar. So you're right. So it's really about the intention of the person blowing the shofar, even if it's a stolen shofar.
The person listening to a stolen shofar may not even know it's stolen.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, that's true.
So has that person fulfilled the mitzvah, or unknowingly still not fulfilled?
Which one? The stolen?
The person who hears it. If I'm walking by and somebody's practicing,
Yeah.
have I fulfilled the mitzvah if I don't know that it's practice, if I actually see?
Right. No, I think because it's the intention of the shofar blower.
So even if I don't know,
What's that? I guess it could be another shul, I suppose, or something. Right, but they're practicing. That's the case. Yeah, right. The case is that they're practicing, right? And they don't have the intention. right? And so there has to be some intention, either, let's say by the blower, by the listener, there has to be intentionality involved, right? And so, one could extend that and make the case that if you're not paying attention in synagogue, right, I guess you would. Yes, no? Or if you're in shul, zero intention.
When they're blowing the shofar or just
It's hard to do. It's a theoretical case. To keep you out, right? So it's not really possible, right? Because you're listening with intent. Very good. All right, so let's end with the blowing of the shofar, and let's go through all four. How's that sound? We'll do the exercise. Let's remind ourselves. Ken Levine, you have the organized brain. You remember the four? The four categories of intentionality. Oh, maybe you're not the right. Who's got them? Cry, revelation, coronation, and the physics, which means, what does the physics mean? Genuine, authentic. Is that one? Yeah. Genuine, authentic. So maybe shouldn't come out the physics. Right, it should be natural and genuine. Undecorated, right. Good, okay, so this is not a blow. Well, in Elul, we do blow, yeah. Yes, you should not kill for the shofar, right? You should take it from an animal that's being eaten or something else. Yeah, but yes, you shouldn't kill for a shofar. Yeah. No, it can be, kill them anyway. Yeah.
So, as someone who's blown shofar a lot,
Yeah.
relatively speaking, and even this morning, there was some concern about whether the shofar blower who was supposed to be here was going to show up. And a note got exchanged, and the person showed up before I finished reading the note. And they were kind of in a hurry because they were late getting to the service.
Mm-hmm.
And then they kind of struggled blowing the shofar.
Yeah.
So the intention was to blow the shofar,
Mm-hmm.
even though the person didn't do it as they would have preferred.
Right.
Something that was getting in the way.
Mm.
Something to do with performance.
Right.
That was used.
Mm.
And I used for myself the story I shared with the person once, that when I take some deep breaths, let them out, and basically relax, then that shofar sounds very different. I blow the shofar very differently.
Right.
If I'm like waking up, oh, I got to practice the shofar, let me go do that.
Right. Right.
You know,
Right.
It doesn't quite come out right. So it ends up, for those of us who are shofar blowers, it's a very different experience than just hearing it, because we provide the sound, but we also hear the sound.
Right. Right. Yeah.
And so that's a whole different thing. And I think I want to get back to the thought I've haven't tied in with, which is that I think we don't come in so pure. I think we come in fairly broken
Mm-hmm.
to services.
Right.
And what the services do, the shofar blowing and the services themselves, is they help open us up to homes.
Right. So it's Rabbi Horowitz's. Yeah. Very good. So let's rise and we'll blow the shofar and sort of go through the four kavanot that we talked about. The first one is the cry. The revelation. The coronation. genuine, pure. You are pure, you are genuine. Shanatata bi tehorahi. Your soul is beautiful and perfect. All right. Baruch to you, baruch to you.
So we're going to take literally a 5-minute break so you can grab something and take care of things and whatever. 5 minutes back here. Thank you, Rabbi.
You're welcome.
Oh, you couldn't hear them. Oh, you couldn't hear him either? Okay. Okay. Yeah. All right.
I think it's the combo of the two mics.
Turn this one off. This one, you have to turn it off for now.
That's still on.
Can't see. Thank you. Okay, if you're in the lobby, we're going to invite you back in. There you go. There you go. All right, so we shift from the power of the shofar and its many ways of communicating and trying to evoke within us a series of feelings to the liturgy, which has parallel kinds of ways of communication and the different sounds. I'm trying to find the balance between being heard there and right, and at the same time not squeaking. I'll turn it off in a second. All right. All right. Shifting from the power of the shofar, which is one element of the service, to the liturgy and the power that comes through the music as well as the intent behind the music, and that's where we happen to have a resident expert, our Hazzan, who's going to share with us and give us some wisdom.
Yeah, okay. Can you hear me? Does this, I think we're all microphone challenged today. Okay. Hi, everybody. Good. Hey, good to see you. Are we good with the mics? Can you hear it okay over there for the live stream? Okay, just let me know. I'm using a little lapel mic for the people who are streaming. It's good to see everybody. Shavua Tov. Thank you, Cantor Mark, for arranging this and putting this together, and also thank you for allowing me to not have to follow you. I like going before Cantor Mark because he's our resident scholar. So here's what I'm going to try to do. I'm not going to speak for a whole hour, I promise. I'll be probably closer to maybe 30 to 40 minutes or so. But here's my goal for what I hope to cover together. For one, we're going to look at the musical liturgy of the high holidays. My background, of course, comes from the musical side, the cantorial side. That's my passion. That's sort of, for me, my entry into this whole world. Those of you who know me also know I have an opera background as well. There's this great quote by the greatest opera composer, the most famous opera composer is Verdi, is his name, Italian opera composer. And he said in Italian, prima la musica e dopo le parole. First comes the music and then comes the words. And that was his sort of credo in creating opera. We're not talking about opera now. We're talking about tefillah. We're talking about prayer. But for me, the principle often applies more and more that as people and congregations have less knowledge of the actual Hebrew and the words, oftentimes they can sort of surf on the emotional wave that the music can propel us through. So I want to talk a little bit about the mechanics of the high holiday service from the musical lens. So that's the goal. But before getting into the music of the high holidays, it's important to just take a couple of minutes and talk specifically about the machzor and the actual structure and the history of how the high holiday service is structured. So Wendy, of course, and I spent a lot of time together. Sorry to call you out, but just because we spent so much time together, and as well, we did as well in the chorus. So when we looked at the services, we would break our services, as you'd recall, into 6 categories, right? We would have Rosh Hashanah, we would have Slichot, which is coming up this Saturday evening, the Slichot sort of preliminary service. We would have Rosh Hashanah evening. We would have Rosh Hashanah day, and that was kind of the Rosh Hashanah music that we would look at together. Of course, there's 2 days of Rosh Hashanah, but the vast majority of the music is repeated on day 1 into day 2. We would change a couple of things here and there, like, for example, we might have the prayer for the state of Israel, the Avinu Sheba Shamayim, be one musical piece or selection the first day, and then do a slightly different one the second. For example, the first day we would often do the Finkelstein, the Avinu Shabashamayim Sor Yisrael V'Goalo. We all know and love that. The second day we might do the Avinu Shabashamayim Sor Yisrael V'Goalo. So that little differences, but more or less pretty much the same music between the 2 days. Then, moving ahead to Yom Kippur, Kol Nidre is the biggie, right? That's if it's sort of if you go to shul once a year, that's probably it. And we'll talk a little bit about the music behind that and what may be the reason for that. Then, of course, Yom Kippur Day, which follows a lot of the structure of Rosh Hashanah Day with some additional things that are put into the service. Specifically, we do the Avodah service on Yom Kippur, which is sort of a reenactment of what would happen during the time of the Holy Temple, when the high priest would go into the Kadosh Kadoshim and say the secret name of God that only the high priest would know. So we would reenact that as well. We do the martyrology, we do Yizkor, happens on Yom Kippur Day. And then we do a very abrupt kind of change musically towards the end of Yom Kippur in the Ne'ilah service, the final hour where we all stand up. And what I love our tradition here, how everybody gets their opportunity in front of the ark as a family. So those are the musical ways that we would look at these services. Again, those 6 different categories. I'm curious if I ask all of you, if you think of one piece of music in the high holidays that says, we're in the high holidays, what is it? The Shehechianu on Kol Nidre. I'm going to repeat back what you say so we hear it in the live stream. Go ahead, please. Avinu Malkeinu. Yeah, great. I love the Avinu Malkeinu we do here. Wendy. Okay, go ahead. Kaddish Shalem. And our Adon Olam. Yeah, that's great. Anybody else? Anybody have any different ones besides that? It's Ledor Vador. The Ledor Vador. Ledor Vador, Ledor Vador. And the Shechianu. But we do that in both. Okay, so oh, please, go ahead, Steve. In the Hineni, when I start in the back of the right and walk up front.
And as you come up the aisle, if I remember correctly, your voice gets louder and louder and louder.
Yeah.
Until the whole sanctuary shakes.
Oh wow. Okay, good. Amazing. That's great. It's that's my Doppler effect. Yeah. Wow, okay, very cool, very cool. Yeah, go ahead, Gail. Unatana Tokev. Interesting, okay. Very good, yeah. Well, by the way, you're all illustrating my point beautifully. Thank you very much. Your checks are in the mail. This is, the point that I'm going to make here, first of all, every synagogue, every congregation has their own traditions. So it's very hard to make a blanket statement and say these are the important pieces of the high holidays musicologically. One of the first things I did, this will be my 9th time having the honor of being the Shliach Tzibor here for the high holidays coming up. Unbelievable to think that just kind of flew by in a clip. But one of the first things I did when Rabbi Teller asked me if I would serve as the Hazzan for the high holidays was I said, well, I have to sit down with you then, and we're going to go through the Machzor page by page. I have to know what are the traditions of this community. What do we do here for the high holidays? What are the moments where the congregation sings along? What are the moments, the choir selections, of course, at that point, had to meet with our choir director and go through and figure out everything. And what are the traditions that are important to this community? So one of the things that I'll share with you here, I brought a little show and tell This is a book that, of course, Cantor Levine is smiling and knows very well. This is Zamru Lo. This is put out and compiled by Cantor Shiavitz, but it's also put out by the Cantor's Assembly, and you can order these books online. This is volume 2 for the High Holidays. The first volume is for Shabbat and has all of the different melodies that would appear in different congregations. So let me show you an example here. Okay, so we're going to start in order. We'll talk Slichot is the first service that we have coming up in the High Holidays, right? This coming Saturday evening. One of the prayers that is done well, it's before you even get to the Machzor. Often it's actual Slichot services are not in the Machzor, strangely enough. Often the Machzor will start with Rosh Hashanah evening. So, for example, we have our own little handouts that we do for Slichot. But one of the prayers that we have there is the Hanashamalach. Are you familiar with this Hanashamalach? So our melody, can anybody recall it? There it is. Hanashamalach v'haguf palach Hanashama Hanashama v'haguf palach. Okay, so Zamru Lo, we have Hanashamalach, right? You see, this is one melody here by Karl Bach. Then I turn the page, and here's a liturgical version of Hanashamalach. This is by Glick. This one is by Osborne. So these are all different. Here's another Hanashamalach here. So what I would do is I would sit down with Rabbi Teller, and I would say, which one does Brith Shalom do? What is the Brith Shalom one? Because the worst thing is to have a new Hazzan get up on the bima and sing a bunch of melodies at you you've never heard. You can't sing along. So you can get away each year, maybe dropping 1 or 2 or 3 new melodies in there. And over a period of many years, the congregation will kind of let you know which ones they're okay with, especially our shul, right? We're all so shy and timid. So this is a great resource, is to look at the liturgy specifically for this. So I want to go through some of the selections that you all mentioned. Avinu Malkeinu, you had mentioned as being one of your favorites. Steve, you'd mentioned the Hineni as well as being one of your favorites. We talked about the Shehechianu, talked about L'Dor Vador. These are, for me, you mentioned right off the bat the pieces that I think make Brith Shalom's High Holidays feel like the High Holidays to me. We, of course, have a different melody that we would do for L'Dor Vador during the year. But when it comes to the High Holidays here, we do the Finkelstein L'Dor Vador. And everybody gets up. And what's amazing is, and Cantor Mark, you can agree with me on this, when we're on the bima, we have just this incredible opportunity to look out and see the faces of all of our congregants. And over the years, I've started to predict and know which melodies are going to make which people cry. And it's a really true thing. It's amazing. Like, I know there is a family that when it comes to L'Dor Vador, they wrap their arms around one another and they just weep. And it's the most beautiful thing to get to watch and to see what is it about this music that inspires us. So that's what I'm going to try to do. I've asked for the piano to be put here because I'm going to start explicating and dissecting some of the music behind some of these pieces that we know so well. So I'm going to skip around a little bit over the next, 25 minutes now, I guess, as we listen to some of these different selections. So this is not going to be in the order of the actual High Holiday services that you would hear. But the first one, it's interesting, nobody mentioned what is probably the most iconic High Holiday melody of all, Kol Nidre. Isn't that interesting? Did you? I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. I apologize. Yeah, you did mention that. Okay. But what I heard at least was a lot of the things that make Brith Shalom's High Holidays so special. But yet I remember as a young boy going to my father's shul at Kol Nidre and the drama of that moment. I mean, it's really operatic. I mean, it really is. The bima is filled with all of the past presidents of the shul. The Torahs are all covered in white. Everybody's wearing white. We've just stuffed our bellies, and we know we're like at the start of the marathon. You know, it's like we're in our corrals, and we're just getting nervous here because we know what's in front of us. You know, I remember my father was a nervous wreck before Kol Nidre. And honestly, I was too before I started here. I said, oh, I've never led services for this many people. And this was also a shul where I was the member first and just loved everyone. I didn't want to let anybody down and mess it up. And it's this nerve-wracking moment. Then everybody's standing. And then all of a sudden, it begins. And just that alone, I get the chills. There's something that is iconic and timeless of this melody. We don't know where this melody originated. We know that it is at least 200 years old. We know that the setting that is currently done, that is now sung by most choirs or arranged for string quartet or piano or whoever, whatever the arrangement is, was by a man, Henry Rusotto. But he was the person who arranged a pre-existing melody. He did not write that melody. He took it and arranged it in 4 parts. Now, there's something, why does that melody impact us so much? I have a wild idea that I'm going to throw out. It, to me, brace yourself, is goyish. There is something, I mean it, so there is something about a 4-part choir that is Bach. That to me is a Bach chorale. I'm going to prove my point for you, and I'm going to put this right into the mic so you can hopefully hear this. Let's see. Bach was the greatest composer in the history of classical music because he codified the piano. You ever hear of the well-tempered clavier, right? The well-tempered, he made temperament that every A flat was the same as every G sharp, and that these were the notes that you would use, and he created the rules of counterpoint. And that was what all composers create. They say that Bach is the originator, and everybody stands on the shoulders of Bach. So Bach, of course, living in Leipzig, had this job working in different churches where he would write one chorale after another. And all of the great choral composers would use this counterpoint to be able to follow along in this method. So. It's Bach counterpoint to a T. If you analyze the soprano, tenor, alto, and bass line, that's what it is. But what is the meaning of Kol Nidre? What are we trying to say? And where does this come from? This is talking about a Jewish people that has been forced into this other world and now is shaking off and saying, all of the oaths that I made in my forced conversion do not apply. So to me, it's perfect to set it that way. That's my interpretation. You can completely discard it. You can disagree with it. You can look skeptically at it. That's fine. But I wanted to set that up for you. Now, why is it that Kol Nidre, though, after we have that Bach chorale, right, in the beginning, one of the things that to me about Kol Nidre falls flat emotionally, just from a musical standpoint, is the lack of rhythm. And I'm gonna say what I mean by this, okay? So we've just had our Bach chorale introduction, right? And then we get Kol Nidre Viesare Vacharame. Like, where's the pulse? Can you count where the rhythm is? You can't. It's very hard to do that. What you do have, you have these little brief moments of it where it comes in. So there are these little moments where it goes back and forth between being in a strict rhythm and being loose. So to me, the in my feelings is after you've had all these big, you know, and then you get this. This is what always gets me. Just those couple of bars, for me, have such emotion behind them. Do you feel that as well? Or am I projecting something onto you? Yeah. So for me, the reason why that melody is so impactful is because now there's some pulse, there's some rhythm, there's a heartbeat behind what we're doing, right? So we get you can count it. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, right? There's a rhythm behind it, whereas the other things, much less so, right? So if I go, it's hard. It's ambiguous. Please. Yeah. No. Thank you. It's a great question. The question is why do the places without as much rhythmic pull behind them impact me less? Because of the human heartbeat. Because there's a pulse behind everything, musically speaking, that drives us forward. So let's skip ahead to a different piece from the high holidays that does affect everyone, right? One, two, three. Do you feel that pulse? It kind of moves you, right? And that's what music should do. So that's a difference to me between Kol Nidre and something that just kind of flows and moves. And it's also, that's our human nature, right? And there's a reason why people kind of sway back and try swaying to Kol Nidre. Yeah, go ahead.
So something on that comes to mind on Kol Nidre, on the shifts from the rhythmic sections to the parts that are not, is maybe that there's a shift to a focus on the words rather than the music. So when you lose the rhythm, all you have left is the words.
Yeah, that's beautiful. When you lose the rhythm, all you have left are the words. To me, I love to see a marriage of the two. Just where the words and the music, and they just infuse and they carry me to some other place. That's really what moves me. I mean, it's all moving, right? But there are different degrees of being affected emotionally. And what's so beautiful, it's like, the Rothko Chapel. It's like a great Rothko painting where the music is a canvas, right? It's about what are we projecting onto it from our own lives, our own memories. Like for me, I'm always very affected by certain moments in the service, Havein Yakir Li Ephraim, that for me, because I used to sing that with my father. You know, and I remember being just a little boy, just sort of standing around his leg as he would, you know, lead the service. And I could do that because he was the rabbi, you know, and it was just that meaningful moment of being able to do that. Yeah. So, Le Dor Vador, I adore this setting so much. This, of course, Meir Finkelstein wrote this in the late 1970s when he was the cantor in Los Angeles there. And this is, of course, Finkelstein, who was our neighbor across the street up until about 2 years ago at Beth Yeshurun. He's arguably the most famous living Jewish composer of synagogue music, I would say. I mean, is that probably fair to say, Mark? Would you think? I can't really think of anybody that could surpass him now. I mean, there's some younger people now coming up that are different style, more kind of contemporary. But what I love about Meir Finkelstein is that he has a great classical background as well as a pianist and a composer and a cantor. So he could merge all of these things together, and he wrote things that just felt good in his own voice. I want to get back to this point of rhythm for a moment, right? Because here's a great example of this. Le Dor Vador, one of the things that, and I know this is going out on YouTube, so if Cantor Finkelstein ever hears this, know I love and respect you. One of the things that, that for me, he does so beautifully in Le Dor Vador is this constant movement of eighth notes, right? So, Le Dor Vador, Ulenetzach netzachim, ulenetzach netzachim, kedushacha nagis. And then it goes, this is how it actually is written. I want you to hear it. V'shivchacha Eloheinu, mivino lo yamosh le'olam v'oen. So to me, do you hear how the piano just stops and sits on each of those notes? So again, he goes, V'shivchacha Eloheinu. They're just block chords. So what I have asked Charlie to do over the years is to arpeggiate these chords, to keep that movement going, because what he wrote is so beautiful, I don't want it to come to a standstill. I want it to keep moving. So I wind up asking him to do something like, so it keeps the movement going. I think that's more musically fulfilling. Okay? What's that? It's more powerful. Yeah, there's something about that. Okay, so a couple other pieces I want to also mention that we do that are part of Brith Shalom's musical identity, I would say, for the high holidays, is some of our congregational melodies that we all sing together. So the Zachrenu that we do, the Zachrenu, or let me get the, that was right, okay. Zachrenu, 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 Zachrenu l'chaim, melech, melech, chafetz b'chaim. This is done on the daytime service during the Musaf, Amida. We would do that. So there's this calling of and then we always go back to the chorus. Musically, what is this note? We're in F minor. So that's the 5. So this is the dominant, dominant, dominant to tonic. We're always starting on the 5. Now, well, this is a different key. A couple minutes later in the service, we get into Machal Kel Chaim. So listen to Machal Kel Chaim without the davening in between. Right? Machal Kel Chaim is the same exact musical DNA as the Zachrenu. So Zachrenu, Zachrenu, Me'ayim b'chesed. So same exact idea, right? Both Solzim, our buddy. Yeah. Yeah, Ledor Vador, right? But so the other thing too is they're both waltzes. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, Zachrenu, 2, 3, Zachrenu, Kel Chaim b'chesed. So the reason I bring this up is because it leads us into Unatana Tokef, right? So what we do in our service, right, is we have a couple other melodies that we do. We do a very traditional Unatana Tokef, which is almost what we'd refer to as a Mi-Sinai melody, like from Mount Sinai. It's been around forever, the Unatane Tokef Kedushat Hayom Ki Hu Melech. So you do that. And then we wait a minute, and then you get, we do Kavakarat at that point. Or in our shul, one of the things that everybody smiles about is the Uva Shofar Gadol, because it reminds us of somebody who I did not know. I believe his name was Bernie, is that right? Bernie Goldberg. Yeah, I did not know Bernie myself, but people told me stories about how he would sing that. Uva Shofar Gadol. So I see people smiling in recognition of him, which is lovely. And then after that, we get what? Again, a waltz for Rosh Hashanah. So it's great, I think, to have this set up musically of how we do that in our shul, as we go from a Zachrenu to a Machal Kel Chaim to Rosh Hashanah. Same exact kind of setup. They all have a waltz. There's a feeling of like returning home. And what's especially great is when you get past the chorus a few times. Mi, 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 vaish, o mi, o mi, o mi, vamayim, mi, vacherev, o mi, vachaya, o mi, vachaya. It kind of arrives at this moment. And I think thematically it's effective. I really do. I love that. I think that's powerful. Okay? So, of course, we also talked about the Shechianu, right? That's such a big moment, especially in our shul. I love Shechianu. This year, I can't wait to do the Shechianu. Every year I look forward to it. It's just a great musical moment. But what I'll say about the Shechianu is the beauty of the Shechianu that we do is in its complete, total simplicity. It is a musical standpoint of the most basic compositions I've ever seen. There are two little pieces of musical DNA, and you just go back and forth between them, and you just repeat, 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 repeat. And that feeling of familiarity, same with like the Hasidic Kaddish, which we do, right? The it has that. We do it like 300 times, you know, during the high holidays. So it's time we get to the Hasidic Kaddish, we feel like, here it is again. but there's also, we know it's also one of the last things in the service. So there's a feeling of arrival at that. Wendy, please. Yeah. 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 And we get the shofar blast as well, which is pretty fun. The Shechianu, I'll give you very quickly the roadmap of the Shechianu. And what I have to tell you is, and Wendy and Joyce, you can attest to this, but this actual sheet music was one of the most confusing things for the choir to ever remember how to do, because there are so many repeat signs in it. To go back and do the melody, but then you go and do the melody with the second ending, and then you repeat to the first beginning, the part B, and then you go, and it's just, it's so confusing to actually know which page you're on, and people are turning back and forth in the binders and whatever. So, of course, we know how it starts, right? And here's the first melody we hear, right? So that's the and the choir and then what? Repeats. Nope, not yet. It just repeats the same melody, right? You get a nice big 5/7 chord, and we all know where we're headed now. And that's it. That's the whole composition. And we repeat, and then, right? Yeah, and then we do it again, but this time I go, we do it up, I do it down, do it upside down, inside out. And then, when we're done with that, we go to what? We go to, the first melody, and that's the roadmap of the Shechianu. Yeah, please. Cantor Ralph Schlossberg is his name. Yeah, not a very well-known composer of Jewish music. Unlike the last musical example that I'll give you, which is, to me, from a musical standpoint, I think the best composition musically of the High Holidays for me. And if you can already see what's on the page, anybody have a guess what it is? What's that? Adonai Roi Loch, sorry, interesting. No, not that one, although that is a lovely, lovely piece. Yeah, Avinu Malkeinu. Yeah, for me, this is Max Janowski, who is one of the great, like, titans of Jewish music. And the Avinu Malkeinu is just a masterpiece, I think. There's something about this, and I'll spend a moment with you kind of breaking down the music for this, and then we'll kind of call it. So Avinu Malkeinu, the legend of Avinu Malkeinu was that it was originated, the words, by Rabbi Akeidah. And there was this story that they were in a drought praying for rain, and the other rabbi had done 24 different brachot to try to ask for rain, and none of them worked. And Rabbi Akeidah, in a moment of simplicity and tenderness, just turned to Hashem and said, Avinu Malkeinu, Ein melech lanu ela ata. We have no other God but you. And this juxtaposition of God as a father, as like a tender, loving father, and a king, like a righteous king. This juxtaposition, the skies opened up and it began to rain. That's the story of Avinu Malkeinu. I adore this moment in the service so much, and in fact, Cantor Rachel Goldman over at Beth Yeshurun and I were we had a friendly discussion over who would sing the Avinu Malkeinu this year at Slichot, and she was generous enough to let me win the debate because she has so many fabulous compositions, and she's a great colleague. So I'm grateful to get to do it on Saturday night at Slichot service. So, okay, let's listen to Avinu Malkeinu for a moment, and I'll stop and start. So here. Avinu, let me get the notes right. Sorry, give me 2 seconds. So where are we? Avinu Malkeinu, God Hashem Akoleinu. Avinu Malkeinu, Katanu Lefanecha. Avinu Malkeinu, Chamol Aleinu, V'yalol Aleinu, V'tabeinu. So what's happening musically is we're getting one note. It's an ostinato. It's relentless. Every chord happens around this. So yeah. Avinu Malkeinu, Shema Koleinu. There it is again. It won't stop. It's relentless, you know. Chatanu lefanecha, Avinu Malkeinu, Chamol Aleinu, V'yalol Aleinu. And then it changes, and we go back to something else. But so musically, the great composers, that's a device that's used very frequently to signal, and I'm just sharing what this is in classical music, the inevitability of death. That's what that means, the inescapable death that's coming. So I can give you one of the great examples of this comes from, where are we? It comes from Schubert, and he has very specifically this one song that was like the classic example of this, called Die Liebe Farbe, which I'll give you. And the note to listen for here is this E. Every single chord, every single note has this in it. Kleiden in grüne Tränen weisen, mein Schatz hat grün so gern, mein Schatz hat grün so gern. You hear it every single, it's relentless. And that, to me, is Avinu Malkeinu. It has that kind of feeling behind it, where no matter where you go, you can't escape that note. It's coming back for you, no matter what. So then the drama gets ratcheted up even a bit more. So you get this. We're back. Let's get back to our key. And you also get the lowest note on the piano that Charlie gets to hit. I mean, there's one lower, but that's about as low as you can get. So it's this foundation, like the ground is opening up, and it's Avinu Malkeinu. It has such drama and power behind it. And then you get this, Avinu Malkeinu, Shema Koleinu, Koleinu, B'Sefer Chaim Tovim, Avinu Malkeinu. And you get this wild chord. What is that chord, right? Right before my big high note. Kadesh Aleinu, Kadesh Aleinu, Shana Tova. The choir, I mean, it's such a great piece of music. And I guess my is that in thinking about the structure of the tefillot, thinking about the meaning of the words, thinking about the music that's propelling us forward, that it helps us all reach a deeper level of feeling and emotion this high holidays together. So that's my talk. I'm happy to answer any questions afterwards if you want about any of the musical stuff. That's a little insight into some of the musical moments that I love from our school for the high holidays.
I'm going to turn this one on. Yeah, okay.
Standing up there with past president.
You don't think it's a problem because of this?
Well, this has been off the whole time, and it, like when you turn that one on, it'll start.
It's on. Right, yeah, it is on.
Okay, have it as a backup in case you want to switch out.
Okay. Because I use it for Shabbos and it hasn't been a problem.
Right now,
it's squeaking now? Well, that could be it too.
but this is off. Yeah.
Is it squeaking now? Do you hear a squeak now? You do. Okay.
Yeah, I just think there might be, the level might be set too high, but I would shut that one off altogether.
Bigger struggles in life. Much better. There we go. Ta-da. Yeah, I need my own valet.
He's got it. Anything you need, my friend.
There we go. Thanks.
There you go.
Okay. All right, I'm going to bring everybody in. We'll get started. Did you change your hair or something different? Your hair? Come on down. Okay. Oh. All right, we invite everybody, come on in. Yeah, it's a little chilly. This is how you don't fall asleep. There's copies of these. I have extras here, but there's copies around. Please pass. There's a whole bunch here. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it's just the one page. It's double-sided, but one page. So the advantage of going last is you get inspired by what you hear, and it provokes certain kinds of thoughts and that I want to share. So the rabbi talked about the coronation sounds of the shofar, and I've often talked about when we do the Torah service, it really is a coronation. It was a coronation of the king walking out into the community, and there you hear the music. It goes from the shacharit, which is in this harmonic minor, a variation on harmonic minor and has a tension to it. It goes into Adonai Mel at this major key, and you can almost hear the shofars blasting and the trumpets blasting, and it's very deliberate. It is a coronation. The other thing is, and I talked about this when I taught about Nila last year, I think this is my own insight. It may be. I think I came up with this myself. I could be 100% wrong. You get to Nila. Nila is that last moment. There's this sense of tension that's going on. And it starts out, Yikadal, V'yitkadash. Rarely music is that second do-re, the re emphasized like that. Okay, it's unique in most music. And all of a sudden, I'm listening to this and I'm going, where do I know that from? Going, da-dun, da-dun. It's right, they did the same thing. They used the same technique to create that sense of tension in the moment, right? Kaddish for Nila is Jaws. Yeah, well, that's right. But you know, you can see the shark jumping out of the water and feel that sense of, oh my God. Right, here comes dinner, right? There you go. All right, so, you know, sometimes things happen organically. The rabbi spoke about the shofar. Hazzan spoke about the tefillah. And I'm going to speak about the third component of the service, and that's the Torah readings and the messages of the Torah reading. We didn't plan it that way, but really those are the three elements that are playing, and we all sort of came to it on our own. Yesterday, I spoke a little bit about the text of the Aramean, the Wandering Aramean, and I said to you it's a very well-known text. It's one that we know it because it comes from the Haggadah. It's very common. The text I want to address today is, in terms of being famous and well-known, is sort of that on steroids. All right? This is a text that Jews have used, Christians have commented on, so have a number of the philosophers of the last few centuries. It is a text that is used by Christians as a prelude to the Passion story. It is a text used by Jews, in a sense, as a model for martyrdom throughout history. And so let's begin by reading. For those of you who are at home, we're looking at Genesis 22. The book of Genesis, chapter 22, and we're going to read 19 verses in total. That's our text for today, those 19 verses. So since I have the mic, I'm going to read it. Please follow along. Sometime afterward, God put Abraham to the test. He said to him, Abraham, and he answered, Here I am, Hineni. And he said, Take your son, your favored one, Isaac, whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah, and offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the heights that I will point out to you. So early the next morning, Abraham saddled his ass and took with him 2 of his servants and his son Isaac. He split the wood for the burnt offering. He set out for the place of which God had told him. On the third day, again, you have that third day, you have the same kind of concept from the rabbi spoke about at Sinai. On the third day, Abraham looked up and saw the place from afar. Then Abraham said to his servants, You stay here with the ass. The boy and I will go up there, we'll worship, and we will return to you. Abraham took the wood for the burnt offering and put it on his son Isaac. He himself took the firestone and the knife, and the two walked off together. Then Isaac said to his father, Abraham, Father. And he answered him, Yes, my son. And he said, Here's the firestone, here's the wood. Where is the sheep that we're about to offer up? And Abraham said, listen to the ambiguity here. God will see to the sheep for his burnt offering, my son. Okay? And the two of them walked off together. They arrived at the place of which God had told him. Abraham built an altar there. He lays out the wood. He bound his son Isaac. He laid Isaac on top of the altar, on top of the wood, and Abraham picked up the knife to slay his son. Then an angel of the Lord called to him from heaven, Abraham, Abraham. And he answered once again, Hineni, here I am. And he said, Do not raise your hand against the boy or do anything to him. For now I know that you fear God, since you have not withheld your son, your favored one, from me. When Abraham looked up, his eye fell upon a ram caught in the thicket by its horns. So Abraham took the ram, offered it up as a burnt offering in place of his son. And Abraham named the place Adonai Yireh, whence this present saying, On the mountain of the Lord there is vision. The angel of the Lord called to Abraham a second time from heaven. And he said, By myself I swear, the Lord declares, because you have done this, and not withheld your son, your favored one, I will bestow my blessing upon you and make your descendants as numerous as the stars of heaven and the sands of the seashore. And your descendants will seize the gates of their foes. All of the nations of the earth shall bless themselves by your descendants, because you have obeyed my command. Abraham then returned to his servants, and they departed together for Beersheba, and Abraham stayed there in Beersheba. Text, I assume, not unfamiliar, correct? This We read it in its annual cycle in Genesis, but we also read it on the second day of Rosh Hashanah. It's the approximate 300 words that are in this text. The intended sacrifice of Isaac is both deeply troubling in many ways, and it remains a continual source of theological struggle. It's a difficult text. These verses represent the culmination of the entire Abraham story within Genesis, and it is traditionally understood as the 10th and the final test of Abraham. Those stories begin in chapter 12. In chapter 12, Abraham is introduced, and when he's first introduced there, and he's already an older person, he is asked by God immediately, right out of the bat, to leave his birthplace, his family, and everything that he has known, all right? And then following up on that in these stories, you have the introduction of a covenantal relationship in which Abraham is promised a land of plenty. He's promised numerous descendants despite the fact that his wife is barren. And so the ultimate birth of Isaac represents not only the blessing of a child to parents, but the potential of the realization of God's promise to him. It's very bound up in the story. Our text begins with God calling out to Abraham and instructing him to bring Isaac to Moriah and there to offer him up burnt offering. And seemingly, without any hesitation, and even with almost a feeling of enthusiasm, Abraham rises the next morning, he gathers all he needs, he takes Isaac, his two servants, and they begin the journey as commanded by God. What we see here, though, in this beginning is that the specifics are very sparse. There's a lot left out of this text, and you're left to conjecture, what is Abraham, what are all of the characters in this story thinking and feeling? We don't have that. That's why we have Midrash, by the way. The text doesn't give it to us. So they arrive at this place, which, again, it's very parallel to Genesis 12. We arrive at this place, God says, just go where I'll tell you. Abraham doesn't even know where he's going. He shows up at the designated location. God says, here. Abraham instructs the servants to stay at the base of the mountain. He and Isaac ascend, and as I highlighted when I said it, and he says to the servants, we will return to you. We all know in advance, that ain't happening, right? It's not happening. They begin their ascent, and Isaac perceptively recognizes the fact that they have everything for the sacrifice except for the sacrifice. Right? There's no animal. And he questions his father about this. And ambiguously, Abraham responds, God will see to the burnt offering, there's no comma, but if you do it in English, comma, my son, but there's no comma in the Hebrew. The burnt offering, my son. You imagine the rabbi's play, okay? Reaching the spot of God's choice at the top of the mountain, Abraham builds the altar, binds Isaac and places him on top of the altar, raises the knife intending to fulfill God's commandment. At that moment, a heavenly angel calls out to him and says to him, stop. He declares Abraham's faith in God and fear of God has been demonstrated. And in response, Abraham sees a ram, all right? And you have all the echoes of the shofar, sees the ram, all right, and offers up the ram instead. The angel once more calls out to him and says to him, due to his intended obedience to God, he would be rewarded with blessings. He would be rewarded with descendants as numerous as the stars in the heavens and the sands on the seashore. And those descendants will serve as a blessing for all people throughout the world. Concluding the tale, Abraham, again, this word together, Abraham and his servants together return to Beersheba. That's what we've got. So let me point out a couple facts in the story. After the attempted sacrifice of Isaac, it is not God, but an angel who appears to communicate with Abraham. And there is no subsequent direct communication between God and Abraham anywhere in the Bible after that. God no longer speaks to him. 2, seems that Isaac doesn't go home, right? Doesn't seem to be returned. And there's lots of midrashim about what Isaac is doing in these subsequent years. He goes off to Yeshiva Shalmala, he's studying in the yeshiva in heaven and everything else. But that's because the text doesn't say, where is he? And so they try to fill it in. And then contextually, in the very next chapter, Sarah dies. We're told of Sarah's death. So that gives you some framework on this. I want to talk a little bit about the structure of this text and its literary analysis. Biblical writings are not merely historical, they are theological in nature. The facts are often presented, but they're really literary tools. They're not facts as we would understand them. They represent instead the author's values and the author's perspectives. And so the Akeidah, this story, is constructed just like that. So let me give you a few examples. If you look at verse 2, you'll see I highlighted the word na in Hebrew. In modern Hebrew, na, you say please. Na lahavir, it's camp language. Na lahavir, please pass. Right? Na lahavir ramela, pass the salt, whatever. Na means please. In the Bible, that is not what's going on. That is not the fact. As a matter of fact, this particle is only used 5 times in the entire Bible, and in every case that it's used, it is an instance where God is demanding something incredulous of an individual, something that seems to defy any kind of rational explanation. It's telling you something bizarre is about to happen. And then, structurally, whereas I described a lot of this is very sparse, we don't have information. On the other hand, there are times where it's overly descriptive. So, for example, you have the syntactic chain found in verse 2. Take your son, take your favored one, the one you love, Isaac. All right, it's like he's getting closer and closer and closer, from sparsity to an exactness that seems bizarre. Offer him on one of the burnt offering on one of the heights that I will point out to you. This cries out for rabbinic interpretation. It also echoes chapter 12, where the stories begin. Kach et bincha et yechid asher ahavta, take your son, the one you love. Kach et bincha, give me a second. I'm sorry, go forth from your land. Go forth from, thank you, I'm confusing text, from your land, from your birthplace, from the house of your father, to the land I'll show you. There's a bracketing here just through the literary tools that are being used. Okay? It frames the conversation. If the first call to Abraham in Genesis 12 is asking Abraham to give up his past, get up and leave, the one in 22 is asking him to give up his future, his progeny. In Genesis 12, the son, Abraham, takes leave of his father, Terach, forever. In 22, Abraham and his son Isaac are preparing to see each other for one last time. As I also noted earlier, that God no longer addresses Abraham after this moment. The commonalities that, by the way, he doesn't address him before chapter 12 and doesn't address him after 22. So the commonalities that flow through these two bracketing moments seem a deliberate literary device. It's not an accident. In this chapter, we're looking at verse 6. Isaac carries the wood for the altar, while Abraham carries the flintstone and the knife. And in the following verse, in verse 7, Isaac questions his father. He makes mention of the wood. He makes mention of the firestone. He doesn't say anything about a knife. Suddenly the knife has disappeared. He may very well have been aware of what was going on and saying, I don't want to address this. I see that knife. I'm not happy about this knife. We also have in Genesis, in verses 6, in this chapter, 6, 8, and 19, a repeated theme. The two of them walked on together. And Robert Alter describes the impassive economy of this refrain. It's a refrain that's occurring throughout the chapter as haunting. That these two people, father and son, together for what threatens to be the last time, together in one purpose, the Father to sacrifice the Son. Silence, as I mentioned to you, also plays a role here. In many ways, the power of the story can be conveyed through its silence, through its glaring lack of any kind of specifics. We lack a number of key facts. Give you an example. How old is Isaac? Okay. Right. Is he 5? Is he a teen? Is he in his 30s? Is he an adult? The silence demands a response, and oftentimes what we find are not only varying explanations and understandings, but conflicting understandings as well. That's one of the midrashim that comes up. And yes, exactly. One midrash, which connects this to the next chapter with Sarah's death, claims that at this moment of the Akeidah of the binding, Isaac is 37 years old. Okay? And therefore, as you mentioned, one of the midrashim says, how does a man in the 130s tie down a 37-year-old? Right? There's obviously a problem. Let him. Right. What that comes down to Isaac's motivations here. Absolutely. In contrast, Ibn Ezra of the Middle Ages describes him as about a 13-year-old. You got a bar mitzvah boy here. All right? And then the Jewish artistic depictions from antiquity and the Middle Ages somehow picture him as about an 8 or 9-year-old. So even within Jewish tradition, the different modalities present Isaac at different stages of life. And it has powerful implications, as I'll show you when we get to the Christian and Jewish differences. There are other problems, other questions. When God issues his command to Abraham, and Abraham sets out to obey, what is Abraham, what are his intentions? What's going on? What are his thoughts in this process? What was Abraham's motivation then in leaving the young men at the bottom of the hill? Why does Abraham choose to leave the then I'll go to this. Wait, let me turn this off. Thank you. Technical difficulties. The best laid plans and God laughs. All right. I'll try to keep this somewhat away. Maybe that'll help. So you have this psychological portrayal of Isaac as a victim of an abusive father. All right? It's a child who's suffering deep trauma. Others believe that this experience of almost being sacrificed accounts for his blindness and his deafness later in life. This is a powerful story. And it produces, as I said earlier, diametrically opposed responses. So let's talk about the relationship between Abraham and Isaac. The terms father and son, you'll see every time it doesn't just say Abraham, it says father Abraham. Every time it says Isaac, it's Isaac Beni, my son. Okay, those terms appear 15 times in these 19 verses. Obviously, there's something being conveyed. This text is the only direct conversation between Abraham and Isaac in the entire text. The only one. And Isaac's words begin with my father, and Abraham's words conclude with my son. Again, a bracketing. This continual reinforcement is meant to show you what is supposed to be a loving relationship. It's trying to emphasize that this is difficult on both of them. However, what we see is a subtle change in language. If you look at verse 22, verse 2, you'll see here, this is before the test itself. It says, your son, your favored one, Isaac, whom you love. Now look post-text, verse 12. Your son, your favored one. Where's that part about whom you love? Look at 16. Your son, your favored one. Something happened here, okay? And the language is telling you there's been a breach. There's a lot of loss that happens in this story. A lot of emotional loss, you'll see. Then we come to the issue of, wait a minute, we will return to you. Abraham the big liar. Abraham Lincoln never told a lie. Abraham here is telling us a lie, okay? We read, we will worship and we will return to you. And so several of the commentators, yes, Eric. Unless he did, but the Bible doesn't tell us. Did. All right. That's not his first lie? You got other lies? Yeah, well, we're going to get to that. The Sarah thing, too. Yes, he's good at this. So, in the face of the false nature of his statement, what do the rabbis do? Why does Abraham do this? He's worried that the boys that are accompanying him, the young lads, will intervene. So he doesn't want their part. He's also worried with Isaac's potential response, so let's not provoke that. And lastly, it's like most of us, the things we don't want to do, we don't voice. We keep, you put them into words, it becomes far more difficult. All right. Comments, thoughts? Yes.
I wonder if he was afraid if they brought the donkey, he might kill and sacrifice donkeys.
Oh, interesting. That might have even provoked the question, why isn't the donkey coming up the hill with us? There's my sacrifice. Good. Sodom and Amorah play out here. Yeah, Aviva Zornberg will respond to that in a little while, but you're absolutely right. So in the lack of information, right? It's like a good synagogue. In a lack of information, rumors fly. That's right. Sometimes, exactly. Right. So that was one way that, obviously what that's telling you is they see the problem. The rabbis saw the problem and are trying to make sense of it. So now, next question that comes up here is, did Abraham pass? Okay. The absoluteness of your answer is great. I mean, I saw Danny Gordis give a lecture on this topic years ago, and the text, that Abraham passed the text, seems by the text itself to be directly communicated that he did, and through implication. It not only does God reaffirm the covenant, in other words, afterwards God gives him a prize, okay? And the details of that covenant and the prizes are elaborated. Whereas earlier in the text, it's always your descendants will be as numerous as the stars in the heaven, or as the sands of the seashore. Here's the first time they come together, and both are used. Okay? On the other hand, as a good Jew would do, on the other hand, some contemporary scholars and rabbis, as I mentioned, Rabbi Danny Gordis, show that this is proof that actually Abraham either failed the test or that he passed the test only when he stopped short of actually engaging in the behavior. And then it contrasts what Sandy said. Wait a minute, Genesis 18, it says, wait a minute, you can't just kill off all the people. There's lots of righteous people in Sodom and Amorah. Okay, what if there's 50? What if there's 40? And it goes all the way down to 10, and then God says, enough with this, and leaves. Okay, there's your minion. Okay, enough of that. And so we're left to question, because again, the Bible leaves us with this problem that we have to struggle with. We're left to question, did Abraham pass or did he fail the test? Comments, thoughts, I'm open to. Go ahead. Yeah, Steve and then Sarah.
I would say that, and I've been called an idiot because I would say this.
Is this your wife speaking?
No.
Okay. Go ahead. All right, so hold on to this, because you're echoing words that Kant is going to offer us in a little while. Okay, so there's support for what you're saying. No one's calling you an idiot. If Kant said it, there's value. Okay? Maybe they didn't know from Kant. Okay? Yes.
That's what I said. I actually think I've read some Rosh where it says that no, Abraham failed because this whole thing teaches that God doesn't want human sacrifice.
Yeah.
That's what there is.
Well, right, and I will finish up with a sense of contextuality, because you cannot do look at things and place 21st century values on them.
But
right.
There's a big point about that not doing what your neighbors do.
Right, which is always the case. Don't be like the Egyptians. Don't do right. We have this constant echo throughout the biblical text. But we're presented here. Yes, Joyce.
I was just going to say, because I was looking at Levine, and God's directly promised him things.
Yes, if it's a definite if-then statement. What? Here it's an angel. Right. God has stopped the conversation. That's correct. In Lech Lecha in chapter 12, it's God speaking directly. And here, by the time the test is over and the covenant is being reaffirmed, it's no longer God doing the reaffirming. That's correct. Clearly, there's lots of moral and ethical problems here. All right? There's a lack of insight into the thinking of the characters, and that heightens the tension of the story. And so, how does a good God, because that's one of the ways we understand God, give me a second, demand of Abraham, his loyal servant, the sacrifice of his son, or any human being on that nature? Yes, ma'am. That's right. Hold on. Yeah, that's what Steve said. Right. Yeah, hold on. The answer is we don't. You know, we all have internal voices. Right? Yeah, right. Yeah, could be. All right, so the first moral question is, how could God do this? The second kind of question that comes up is, what kind of covenant is this where God can just slaughter innocents at his desire? What is this agreement? And third, doesn't the slaughtering of Isaac, the sacrifice of Isaac, actually eliminate the entire covenant? Where are the progeny going to come from? The demand for absolute, unquestioning loyalty in terms of the sacrifice of Isaac is extreme on every single level. The Torah attempts to soften this. Somebody read the first verse for me again. And then I'll read it out loud after you so people online. Go ahead.
Sometime afterward, God put Abraham to the test.
Stop there. The text for the reader, what do we know that Abraham doesn't know? It's a test. Okay? We as the reader have an insight that the participants don't. That's one way the text is trying to soften this whole story. Nonetheless, even if it is just a test, how could God be so cruel as to design such a test? Right, that's also true. Right, that's why we don't know, did he pass or fail? You have to know what pass and fail means before, so otherwise you have no way to measure it. Right. The rabbis then go on to to defend God's actions. Here's how they play. Here's how they play. They take the word, I think it's up in verse 2, and I highlighted it, yes, there, you see it in yellow, v'ha'alehu. V'ha'oleh is the shorish here of go up. V'ha'alehu is offer him up. Okay, offer it up or him up. And so it's traditionally understood as referring to the smoke that arises from the ashes of a sacrifice. The rabbis interpret it differently, and they play with this. And the ha'alehu here from at least one rabbinic perspective is just, when you get to the altar, just pick them up. Just raise them up. Sounds like apologetics to me.
No, because the priest did wave.
Yeah, well, and what do we do with our hands when we wash them? We raise them up. There's a sense of kedusha that comes from this raising alone. Okay? But it does sound an awful lot like apologetics. Let's make the text say something that's more comfortable for us. And so let's go back to some of the problems. We talked about Abraham being this virtuous forefather. We all want to be like Abraham. The world is filled with Abraham's descendants. And when it's for other people, he fights and screams and yells. And for his own son, he gets up early in the morning and rushes off to kill his son. Then Kant says exactly what you said. How do we know that it was actually God speaking to Abraham in issuing this command? So it comes from the world of philosophy, not just from religion.
Also,
yeah.
how do we know that the test that he was putting Abraham to was to know what God has taught him, and that he would say, I'm not sure who I'm talking to.
Yeah, right. When you say, who the heck? Right, there you go. Exactly. Where's your badge? I need to see your God badge.
And it's, why would he just, maybe the trick was that he would say, okay, you're talking to something else, and God wanted him to show him that he had learned what he was being taught, because he came from an idolater.
Everybody, not only came from, everybody around him is still doing it.
That's right. Right. And so he would say, what if he was being tested? And since he lost, he's sent back to monotheism 101.
Yeah, look, I imagine everyone in this room has had the following experience. You get into a tense situation and you create this entire conversation in your head in which you sort of build yourself up into this tension. Because the conversation is happening in your head and it's not real. Right? Right. Then you confront the person who you're going to, and none of that plays out. It's not real. How do you know it's God? Maybe I'm having one of those moments. What's that? Okay.
She's saying I was right one time.
Yeah, let's get it. We'll get somebody to note it, a notary. Aviva Zornberg, in her attempt to understand Abraham's silence throughout this, she notes that 4 chapters ago, as I said, Abraham is willing to suppress is willing to go along and fight with God. Here, to do God's will, she says Abraham has to, in a sense, suppress his humanity. He has to put it away, his capacity for chesed, and thus language itself is lost to him. In such a moment of tension, he loses the language, and he only reclaims the ability to speak after the test is concluded and Isaac is spared, and then words emerge. But it's so powerful a moment that he loses the ability to speak. Yes?
It also says on line 10, and Abraham picked up the knife to slay his son.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't say that he picked it up in such a way that he was ready to jab.
Ready to what?
Just picked it up. So Abraham.
But it does imply that some intention here, to slay his son. There is an intent mentioned. Whether or not and by the way, there are also midrashim that say he did kill him.
Yeah.
Right? That he did kill him. But those are midrashim, the text. But by saying to slay his son, you're right, it's not 100%, but it's implying some intent.
Right. I mean, maybe Abraham was quiet. Maybe it was a quiet journey because he's thinking, okay, any moment here, any time here, just go ahead and tell me stop. Come on.
Right. So the last thing is perhaps he knew it was a test.
Maybe.
Right. If he knows it's a test, he knows God's going to say, wait a minute, stop.
Exactly. So maybe he picked it up. It's like,
Good. Possible. Yeah.
But I think the text says, you put it below, shachat is cutting,
shchita.
a knife and you cut somebody.
Right. Right.
It's not like he picks up the knife and he never intended to do
Right.
that.
The Hebrew is a little more clear. That is correct. Yeah, it's a little more clear. So I want to talk about the aftermath of this disaster. I've often described the book of Genesis as a cookbook for family dysfunction.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay? You have blatant parental favoritism. You have sibling rivalries taken to an extreme. You have representing one's wife as one's sister to protect oneself. All of these behaviors are behaviors worthy of years of professional counsel. All right? And amidst all of those traumas of this book, this is the top.
Is that why
We've reached the apex of family dysfunction.
Is that why it's on Rosh Hashanah?
Well, there's lots of reasons. Yes. Yes. This is an absolute pinnacle of all of those problems. As I've mentioned to you, from verse 16 on, Isaac seems to disappear. Abraham and Isaac never speak again. Not only, Isaac is also absent in the next chapter when it talks about Sarah's death. Isaac is nowhere to be seen for his mother's death. There is an irreparable rupture that clearly happens in the relationship. The only time there's any connection, Isaac returns for Abraham's funeral.
So, at some point, Abraham is concerned that his son needs a wife, but he does not.
He sends the message of Eliezer. Right.
To get him a wife.
Right.
Abraham is not a part.
Right. There's been a clear rupture. The relationship between Isaac and Abraham has been deeply affected by these events. Now, step 2, that's Isaac. As I mentioned to you, right after this, although the Bible doesn't make the connection, but in terms of temporal proximity, the next chapter is Sarah dying.
Yeah.
Sarah, right after that. In other words, she hears what's happened, and one can reach the conclusion that it broke her heart and she died.
What is that crazy man doing now? Oh my
Who am I married to?
God.
Right? She had a heart attack. Okay? It doesn't state it, but could there be a causative relationship? Whatever is clear, again, Sarah is now no longer part of the picture.
That's what the rabbis thought.
Right? And then finally, as I've said several times, God is no longer part of Abraham's picture. Right? You've got a text, even with God, we don't know what God is thinking here. A lot of times we get God, the Bible gives us God's thoughts and plans. I'll see what Abraham will do. We get insight into what God is thinking. Here, we don't have any idea what God is doing. So no matter how you grade this test, pass, fail, what happens out of it is Abraham is completely isolated. No God, no wife, no son. And he's already disposed of Hagar and Ishmael. Right? The outcome of this test, however you want to perceive it, is a man sitting alone. He gets concubines.
Well,
He starts over.
but he, you know what?
So did Job.
But he has God. He married again.
He marries Keturah.
Right.
He's 137 and gets married again.
He has God with him, though.
Good for him, right. And he has children with her, by the way, too.
Does God ever speak to Isaac?
He speaks.
I'm trying to think. There's not a lot. First of all, there are not a lot of stories about Isaac. It's only 2 or 3 chapters, and I'm trying to. I believe there is. I believe there's a discussion of the continuing of the covenant, but I'd have to go look. It's either in 25 or 26 of Genesis. Now I want to take this and play it off Jewish and Christian distinctions. A lot of the responses to this in the Mishnaic times, the Mishnaic times occur right after the destruction of the temple. The destruction of the temple is a liminal junction both for Jews and for Christians. It is a ripe moment in which there is this emergence of theological development. How do we make sense of this? And theology then emerges from that. And you've got all this new rich explication of the Bible in general and this particular story as well. For the Jews, the destruction of the temple is understood as divine punishment for not having lived up to the covenant. You didn't practice enough. You didn't do this. You're not going to get your prize because prize requires behavior. Do A, you get B. All right? You failed. The rabbinic response to that was to double down on scholarship. In other words, let's correct the situation. We will study more. We'll create more. The general population, their response was, we'll observe more mitzvot. We'll take on more of the actions. So one of the reasons Judaism has survived, though this is a very flawed theology, is that when things get bad, they double down on what they're doing. We blame ourselves and try to change it through our actions. Now, in the face of the Holocaust, that kind of theology is really difficult. Okay? For sure. But it has been a tool for survival. There's no doubt in my mind about that.
And now people are coming to shore, I mean.
Right. People, in the face of crisis, people look for tools to help them cope. And coming together in religious community is one of those tools, for sure. For the Christian world, the destruction of the temple meant something completely different. It's a judgment upon Israel in which God rejects the Jews, and therefore you have supersessionism in which the church becomes the new Israel. Same event, different theological understanding of what it means. Both religions are, this is such a fertile time in terms of, we are rabbinic Jews, we're not biblical Jews. This is where Judaism really develops, and it's where Christianity really develops. It's happening in the same time frame. It's happening with the same biblical texts as its source, they would call it the Old Testament. All right, we're sharing them. They're aware of each other and what they're doing. They're aware of, so they're both seeking Roman support during this time. And so you've got two groups that engage in a process of interpretation with the intention of distinguishing themselves from the other. It's not an accident. They deliberately diverged, each one from the other. If Christianity said A, Judaism said B. If Judaism said C, Christianity said D. And that, it was a very deliberate divergence. I want to take our text in particular and look at how that plays. Look at verses 6 to 8. I'm going to read 6 to 8 again. Abraham took the wood for the burnt offering, and he put it on his son Isaac. He took for himself the firestone and the knife, and the two walked off together. Isaac says to his father Abraham, "Father?" He answers, "Yes, my son." And Isaac says, "Here's the firestone, here's the wood, where's the sheep?" Abraham says, "God will see to the sheep his burnt offering, my son," and they walk off together. Okay? Judaism and Christianity take those three verses and play very differently. Depicting Isaac as a youth, Christianity will often see, because again, we don't know. They tend to focus on Isaac as a youth in the story, and they interpret Isaac's behavior as foreshadowing that of Jesus. They note the parallels of Isaac carrying the wood the same way Jesus carries the cross. And there's a claim, it says in the New Testament, the child Isaac was to be fulfilled by the adult Jesus. If I didn't realize this connection, I was 23 years old, I was teaching in a religious school, and I taught about the story of Isaac and this binding. And I gave a test of the kids afterwards. And I got back a story from one of the kids that sounded an awful lot like Jesus. He, without knowing, he made the association. It was only after I realized, I better go back and debunk this, okay? Because obviously what I said and what he heard were not the same thing. There are a lot of parallels. The Jewish response is a very different image of Isaac and one that leads to a different outcome. We tend to portray Isaac as an adult. Isaac, as I mentioned to you, develops into this proto-martyr figure. We see in the early Middle Ages, when they're called upon by the Crusades and the later Inquisition to give up their lives in support of Jewish living, they turn to the biblical source and say, there's an example. Isaac did exactly that. We are justified in doing this because the Bible provides us with a sampling of what the proper behavior is. What is the test? This is where Judaism and Christianity diverge again. According to the New Translation, God put Abraham to the test. The rabbis approach this as Abraham being willing to sacrifice his son in fulfillment of the covenantal relationship. There's a focus on mitzvah. There's a focus on Abraham's willingness to take action upon what God asks. He lifts up the knife. He's ready to go. Alternatively, to the Christian world, this is a test of faith. To the Christian mind, would Abraham have enough faith in God to go forward? And again, a foreshadowing of Jesus. For the Jew, it's about the action. For the Christian, it's about the faith. By the way, I think that duality is not real. I think one of the things the rabbi was talking about as well, that a lot of times these things bleed one into the other. And that kind of dichotomy is sort of academic. Shai Held's new book, he talks about Judaism is about love, and he talks about that very fact that the idea of love being a feeling and an action, the answer is it's not one or the other, it's yes. You can love your wife all you want if you don't show up on some birthdays and anniversaries with certain expressions of that love. The couch sounds good. It's that simple, right? There have to be expressions of what is internally being felt. And with the expressions absent the feeling are also irrelevant. So the dichotomy is not quite as clear. But for Christians, this text reflects the Paul teachings that faith, not deeds, are the supreme defining element in spiritual authenticity. Kierkegaard, I'm going to read what he said twice. I want you to hear what he says. He claims that the essence of the Akeidah, of this story, was that true faith may necessitate the violation of the ethical on occasion, and that the person of faith may in fact defy what he or she knows to be ethical for his faith on rare occasions. What's that? It's a zealot to the nth degree. Let me say it one more time because I want to make sure you hear this. That this is Kierkegaard. True faith may necessitate the violation of the ethical on occasion, and that the person of faith may in fact defy what they know to be ethical on rare occasions. It is bizarre. Right? We live in a world where that's tragic, where those kinds of things we see are tragic. So let me play on that, okay? As we've noted, this story is troubling at best and horrific at worst. In our time, if a parent shows a willingness to sacrifice a child in response to a faith for God, it would be, rightfully, newsworthy, again at best, and more likely, sufficient cause for criminal prosecution and conviction. Right, but there'd be, right, it's so unacceptable that one way or another there's going to be a call to responsibility for this. It is unacceptable in the modern world. All right? So what do we do with that? Perhaps I suggest that as conservative Jews, as modern Jews, our whole perspective on the Bible has changed. We don't take the text in its literal sense. That's what it means to be a non-Orthodox Jew. We're not fundamentalists, okay? We don't accept the story in its full sense as an accurate historical depiction of events. Rather, it's a tradition that is handed down. It's a way of understanding kinds of values through storytelling to teach and evoke conversations. In this case, so it's values clarification. In this case, exploring what are our ultimate connections, our ultimate loyalties. Because you discover what is important to you when two of your loyalties come into conflict. That would be one of the lessons that comes from this. Yes, Eric. Right, the entire Christian theology denies any ability. Right. Yeah. Submit, right? Right. Judaism is, Kierkegaard is definitely representing Christian theology. It is unacceptable to in any way to engage in God with God in argument. Judaism has a completely different story, starting with Abraham and Sodom and Gomorrah. And then it goes through the ages, and the rabbis defend. You have a constant throughout the rabbinic writings of these arguments before God. No, that's not fair. They're midrashic doesn't mean they're not, because midrash is also rabbinic. They tend to focus more on a spirituality. Look, again, I think the dichotomy is not fair. The Hasidim are also very text-focused. They just tend to go a particular direction with it, whereas the Mitnagdim or the Litvaks would be more text-direct in their focus. Yeah. Please. Am I in trouble? Go ahead.
Christians and their faith, which yes,
Mm-hmm.
and Jews question God, but the churches are packed and the synagogues aren't.
Are the churches packed?
Yes.
All right. So first of all, the reports are they're struggling much like we are.
I live in a neighborhood where there's a church on every corner and every school every Sunday.
So to some extent, I would say to you, look, I don't have an answer to that. I'm not going to you go out and you preach to the masses, and you tell them there's nothing they have to do. They don't have to stop eating pork. All right? They don't, what's that? There's no kidding, no circumcision was a big issue. And it's a much easier sell. Doesn't mean it's of greater value, though. Don't confuse the two. Okay? It could be wrong, but it's easier. Right? I would say to you, and on the other hand, that you could play the other extreme. Being an Orthodox Jew is far easier than being a conservative Jew, because you know exactly what you have to do. There's no ambiguity. There's no decisions to be made. It says here in text 22, I put on my right shoe before my left shoe, so that's what I do. On Tuesdays, I shouldn't cut my toenails, so on Tuesdays, I don't cut my toenails. By the way, that's there.
No, Talmud probably does so.
What? The Talmud does say that. Yeah, I have a Hasidic friend who was explaining this to me, and I'm looking with my eyes and just going, rolling back farther. Right? Right.
I just find that in talking to my authentic Christian neighbors, which are everywhere where I live,
Right.
they truly believe this faith, and it's deep and it's warm. And the Jews, I don't get. I mean, everybody.
All right, the one thing.
In general, it's like a culturally Jewish
Right.
type of. That's what I.
So, look, there's a number of ways to understand this, no one right one. I would say to you, but you're comparing Christians in the Bible Belt to Jews far away from their Bible Belt. All right? Perhaps a better comparison might be Jews in Borough Park to the Christians in the Bible Belt. You may be not comparing apples and apples. Okay? That's a theory among many. But I would say to you, it is this whole idea of circumcision you brought up, there is a reason that 3 out of 4 converts to Judaism in history are women. Go figure. Right? Go figure. These kinds of things, where Christianity talks about love in a very ephemeral way, Judaism talks about love through action. You have to take actions that express that mitzvot are not necessarily simply commandments. They're commandments which establish relationship. Through these actions, I connect with God. I actually have to do something. What I feel in my heart is lovely, it's necessary, but insufficient.
Actually, in the Talmud, they also say it's better to do than it is to
Yeah, right. And there's a Talmudic statement that God says this. That God says, better you should follow my commandments than believe in me. Now, obviously, that's rabbinic, and it's not the words of God. But they were sending a message. By the way, think about that, though. They're also, what's the context in which that's being written? Christianity. It's a deliberate rejection of Christian. I got to do something.
But the idea is that if you do, eventually you might believe.
Right. So that's cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance is that your actions lead you to your beliefs, not your beliefs to your actions. And that's very common in the modern world. That is the point of mitzvot. Through your actions, you will come. If you give money to a cause, you actually begin to redefine yourself as the kind of person who gives money to a cause. Your actions change how you see yourself. There's lots of studies on this. Social psychology is a lot of fun.
So why do we have this on Rosh Hashanah reading the story?
All right, so a number of reasons. Rosh Hashanah, first of all, it's the ultimate willingness of loyalty to God. So, this is where that's one. 2 is the whole ram thing, the shofar is playing out throughout. There's a lot of cheshbon nefesh. There's a lot of soul searching in this story. We don't know what they're feeling. We're forced to confront. What do you feel when you go through trauma? This is all meant to be it is meant to be traumatic. If you come to the high holidays with the intent of I'm going to have a nice, relaxing, peaceful experience, you have missed the point. You should walk out different than you entered. That's not easy. I'll talk a little bit about that in my second day Rosh Hashanah sermon.
Oh, good.
Yes. So, first of all, this is an echo again from chapter 12. In chapter 12, Abraham is told that the nations of the world will bless themselves through you. So so this is where the whole idea of an or goyim, a light unto the nations, comes from. That through our actions, people will see the beauty of God in the world, and therefore take on those same kinds of behaviors as a way of emulating that which brings spirituality into the world. Whether or not that's a reality, or whether that's a dream of what could be, is a whole discussion. But that, I believe that's what the intent is here. V'nivrechu v'cha, that they will be blessed through you, is in a sense, is what it's saying in Hebrew. Yeah, and there are many people, yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead. Many people will say that there are historians who will look and say, how does Judaism best affect the world? Through diaspora, not through living in the land. That argument
Well,
comes up.
but yeah, not with Startup Nation, we have a lot of things on our telephone and medications
Right.
that we weren't in the land.
Right, and so that's, what's his name, Rob, no. Oh, I can't think of his name, in 1900. Anyway, his whole point was Israel would be the spiritual wheel from which everything emerges for the rest of the world. It'll come to me as soon as we finish, I'm sure.
I have a Christian neighbor, and she says to me, "You're chosen. You're the chosen people."
So you know what they believe they're chosen to. This is baloney, because it's a good accusation, but Jews say we're chosen. Christians will say, if you don't believe in Jesus, you're going to hell. Tell me that's not chosen. Ours doesn't even have an implication. Theirs is like, they're chosen and you're all going to hell. That's chosen.
Believe in Jesus, you get in. You don't believe in Jesus.
Right. Tell me that's not chosen. Right. Every demographic believes they have something special to offer the world, and in reality, they probably do.
But isn't our concept of chosenness chosen to have responsibilities?
Yeah, one, you're not chosen by birth. You have to choose to be chosen. You have to choose to opt in. And two, it's the responsibilities that you take. We chose to accept Torah. It's not an innate status, right? Chosenness is not an innate status. It is based on actions that we take. That's what defines Judaism. It is covenantal, it is mitzvot, it is relational through action. Okay? May we continue this discussion for years to come.